I knew something was off when my weekly risk summary ended up in the company group chat titled Team Memes and Taco Polls. No subject line, no explanation. Just my 14-page compliance doc, sandwiched between a gif of the CFO doing tequila shots at last quarter's earnings call and a poll asking if we should get bean dip or guac for Friday's morale lunch. That was a Monday. By Tuesday, the CEO had scheduled an urgent morale-boosting all-hands and sent me an invite with no agenda, no context. Just bring your smiles. In the subject line, like we were about to get matching t-shirts and trauma bond over Q3 numbers cooked like a Waffle House breakfast. And I went, because I always go. Because I'm the VP of Risk and Compliance, and that apparently translates to office furniture with a pulse. Kind of role where everyone wants you invisible until they're drowning, and then suddenly you're Noah and the Ark and a hotline to God all rolled into one. But don't speak, don't interrupt, don't contradict, don't use words like illegal or criminally negligent unless you want to be invited to transition. I took notes in every meeting, flagged anomalies no one wanted to deal with, highlighted discrepancies between invoice dates and vendor creation logs, forwarded, logged, archived, smiled, nodded, got told I was overthinking things by a man who once submitted expense reports in Comic Sans. Honestly, I was tired. The kind of tired that makes your bones feel older than your parents. But quitting meant I'd have to live with knowing I'd seen the rot and walked away, so I stayed. I stayed while they ignored my memos. I stayed when they reassigned my assistant mid-project to boost agility. I stayed when my monthly brief was reduced to a bullet point on someone else's slide. Hell, I even stayed when the CTO asked me if compliance was more of a suggestion or like a vibe. A vibe. Like ethics were something you spritzed on before a job interview. And while we're here, before we go full corporate Greek tragedy, quick thing, if you're one of those folks who have been listening to these stories without subscribing or tossing a like our way, now's your moment. It seriously helps more than you know. Our team runs on caffeine, legal rage, and those little thumbs up dopamine hits. So hit the buttons before this tale gets any more unhinged. All right, where were we? Oh right, Havix Technologies. Glorified tech unicorn. Internally nicknamed Hallucivix by the few employees still clinging to sanity and stock options. They were flying high on a string of wins, quarterly growth, some flashy contract with a crypto-adjacent AI startup, and a media-friendly CEO who once said on record that transparency is the new profit. He meant translucent, like the Kool-Aid in a church basement punch bowl. You think you see the bottom until you drink it and black out. The culture? Oh, a charming blend of move fast, break everything, and oops, did we delete the audit trail. One time someone printed out our internal whistleblower policy and tacked it to the dartboard in the break room. HR thought it was relatable. But my role? My role was simple. Don't let them set the place on fire too publicly. Quietly mop up behind the clown parade. Document everything. Say nothing. Until one day, I was reviewing vendor contracts and noticed a file labeled Archive Q1 Retry Final PDF. Naming convention that screams we did crimes and tried again. Inside, an invoice trail tied to a company that didn't exist 6 months ago but had already billed us for $380,000 in consulting fees. The listed address? A vape shop 2 blocks from the CEO's condo. I flagged it, again, quietly, no reply. The email bounced once, then suddenly reappeared in my sent folder as read. No response. No action, just silence. That was the moment I stopped hoping they'd do the right thing. That's when I started copying everything. Thumb drive, encrypted, labeled birthday photos. Hidden behind a fake folder of old yoga class videos I downloaded off YouTube. I didn't know exactly how it would end. I didn't need to. I just knew the day was coming. A reckoning, disguised as a morale event, wrapped in a smiley face memo, punctuated by guac. There were 216 people on the all-hands call. I know because I counted them, while the CEO monologued over a backdrop of stock photos and techno-hold music. Leadership realignment, he called it. Tough choices, he said, with the tone of a man ordering a second espresso martini on someone else's tab. I'd heard it all before, usually couched in some McKinsey-approved euphemism like strategic pivot or organizational evolution. But this time was different. This time, he looked directly into the camera. Some roles, while once important, have become inflated, decorative, symbols of a slower past. Then came the laugh, that smirking, quarter-turn-a-camera laugh. And so he continued, we're starting with a little spring cleaning. He paused. Miranda Price, VP of Risk and Compliance, has been let go effective immediately. We thank her for her service. The chat exploded. Grimacing face eyes, wait what? Was this planned? WTF is happening. A few brave souls sent a muted thank you Miranda or a cautious you'll be missed. Most said nothing. HR's video feed was frozen, blank-eyed deer in the MacBook headlights. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. The kind of smile you wear to a funeral when the casket's closed, but you know the dirt underneath still stinks. I reached up, unclipped my Havix badge from the lanyard, quiet, methodical, and slipped it into my pocket. Then I picked up my water bottle, my notebook, and the small silver thumb drive labeled Yoga Retreat 2022. Mauve, I stood, walked out of frame, and clicked leave meeting. The moment the door shut behind me, I sat on the hallway bench like it was a bus stop in hell. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I breathed, slow and even. I imagined I was still in the room, still sitting through another pointless PowerPoint. Except now I was free. Not safe, not okay, but free in the way a building feels once it's been condemned. No one owns it anymore. It's all rubble potential. My phone buzzed with pings from coworkers. Half sympathy, half panic. One Slack message just read, "Holy shit. Do we have a compliance department now?" Another said, "Did you know this was coming?" I left them all unread. I drove home in silence. No music, no news. Just the low hum of my tires on asphalt and the faint buzz of betrayal in my temples. At a red light, I looked at myself in the mirror. Same blazer, same lipstick, same woman they just erased like a typo. I got home, kicked off my heels, and turned on my laptop. There was a brief second where I hovered over the folder, wondering if I was still that woman in the mirror, the one who stayed silent, the one who protected them even as they chipped away at her job. Her title, her damn oxygen, I wasn't. Double click. Password, not your pawn 88 upload window open. Destination, SEC Office of the Whistleblower. Document set, Internal HX Compliance Audit V1V38 size, 2.04 GB encryption, AES 256 upload initiated. Time to completion, 2 minutes 14 seconds. My hand didn't shake, not once. Then, before I could fully exhale, my phone lit up again. A news alert from MarketWatch. I clicked it, heartbeat steady as stone. Breaking, Havix Technologies stock trading halted pending SEC inquiry. Sources cite potential compliance irregularities. I laughed, really laughed. The kind that bubbles up from somewhere hollow and feral and a little holy. I whispered to no one, "Spring cleaning, huh?" I poured myself a glass of wine, the cheap kind I used to reserve for Fridays, toasted my own damn funeral. Not a tear in sight, not yet. Just the sound of the upload finishing and the echo of my own silence, sharp, full, and louder than anything that CEO ever said. I sat in the driver's seat with the AC on low and the windows fogged just enough to make the world feel far away. My hands were still resting on the steering wheel like I'd just pulled over to cry, but I didn't. I wasn't sad. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was focused. The thumb drive burned like a loaded weapon in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out, smoothed my skirt, and plugged it into the USB slot like a surgeon prepping for a quiet kill. My laptop, balanced on the center console, blinked to life with the soft mechanical chime of inevitability. The folder labeled Yoga Retreat 2022 wasn't about yoga, and it sure as hell wasn't a vacation. Inside was everything Havix had tried to delete, dismiss, and discredit, only now it was organized, timestamped, and digitally notarized with metadata so dense it could suffocate a defense attorney. 6 months of work. 6 months of watching them lie to investors, falsify vendor contracts, bury whistleblower reports under pizza receipts. They thought because I was quiet, I was complicit. They mistook exhaustion for compliance. I opened the sex office of the whistleblower portal. Secure, encrypted, anonymous. If I wanted, I didn't. I used my real name. I attached the drive contents, each file hand-selected for maximum clarity and maximum pain. Slack threads where the CFO joked about cooking books with extra butter. Email chains showing intentional backdating of compliance forms. Invoices from ghost vendors whose listed contacts were burner Gmail accounts. A PDF audit log titled Quarter-End Adjustments, last edited by the CEO himself. I added a note compiled over 6 months. All internal, all unaltered. Confirmed violations of Sarbanes-Oxley sections 302, 404, and 802. Will cooperate through counsel. Then I hit submit. The loading bar moved like molasses in winter. 1%, 10, 30, 70. Done. I waited. Nothing happened at first. The silence felt wrong. Too soft for something that just cracked open a multimillion-dollar fraud. I kept glancing at the sky like it should have darkened. It didn't. Just more clouds over the parking lot of a nondescript Panera where I'd parked out of habit. Then buzz, a single vibration from my phone, a Bloomberg alert. Breaking, Havix Technologies trading halted by SEC pending investigation into internal compliance violations. The press always gets the poetry wrong. They said pending investigation like this was the beginning. But it wasn't. This was the climax. The beginning happened months ago in a silent office with me clicking save as copy every time someone in leadership laughed off another crime. Another buzz, this time from my friend Dana in finance. Did you see the news? Did you know? I didn't reply, let them guess. The irony? Havix always bragged about open data culture. They just didn't expect the openness to bleed. I sat still, breathing in the sweet, awful calm that comes after the first domino falls. A part of me thought I should cry. Another part thought I should run, but neither felt right. I pulled out a granola bar from the glove box, unwrapped it with methodical fingers, and took a bite. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even shaky. I'd lived in fear for so long that when it finally ended, I didn't feel the release, I felt the reset. The media would spin it, the board would panic. the CEO would rage. HR would clutch their pearls and pretend this was all brand new information. But me, I'd already crossed the line. I wasn't their employee anymore. I was their consequence. Back at Havoc's, the panic was immediate and stupidly loud. You could hear the digital shrieking even from a mile outside the Slack servers. I wasn't there, but I knew the script. They were still following the same one I'd seen rehearsed for years every time something went wrong, and no one could find an adult in the room. The CEO called an emergency board meeting. He loves those. Makes him feel like he's the guy from Succession, minus the brains and with triple the veneers. His assistant, some poor intern who probably thought crisis management meant sending more scones to the break room, sent calendar invites with all-caps subject lines like urgent, stakeholder alignment sec comms. Meanwhile, legal was clawing through internal drives looking for ground zero. They pulled up the compliance folders or tried to. Half the files were locked behind permissions I'd set months ago. The other half were dummy shells, empty documents with metadata that quietly pointed toward versions stored elsewhere. Not deleted, not destroyed, just not theirs anymore. One of the senior attorneys pinged my old Slack handle, not realizing it had already been deactivated. Miranda, we're seeing inconsistencies in Q2 filings, can you clarify? The reply bounced. No Miranda here, just ghosts and gigabytes. They didn't understand yet that I hadn't triggered a breach. I'd flipped a mirror. They were finally seeing what had always been there, just cleaned up, time-stamped, and ready for daylight. At 2:43 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. I stepped out onto the porch, let the screen door creak behind me, and answered. Miss Price? A voice. Young, professional, nervous but not new. This is James DeWitt, Junior Liaison with the Sex Whistleblower Office. We received your submission. First, thank you. He paused like he didn't quite know how to say what came next. There's a lot in here. We're starting document verification. Would you be willing to confirm a few trails directly? I nodded before remembering he couldn't see me, of course. Happy to cooperate. We spoke for 12 minutes. I walked him through the document hashes, the Slack extraction log, the vendor shell company's IP trail, every breadcrumb laid in place so precisely they'd hold up in a federal courtroom or a damn Supreme Court PowerPoint. He asked, cautiously, are you worried about retaliation? I almost laughed. They already fired me on a live stream. What's left? A long pause, then, understood, we'll be in touch. He hung up. I stood there, staring at the trees. The wind was soft. The birds were loud. Somewhere inside, my tea was going cold. And for the first time in what felt like a decade, I wasn't holding my breath. I knew exactly what was happening at Havoc's. The CEO was pacing, swearing, waving around phrases like miscommunication and rogue actor. The CFO was blaming an intern. Legal was drafting a press statement that said absolutely nothing, while trying to convince PR that operational misunderstanding sounded better than federal probe. The board? Half of them were likely on mute Googling personal liability coverage whistleblower case. They'd forgotten something fundamental. The person who holds the receipts always holds the power. I had the receipts in triplicate. At 4:17 p.m., my email pinged encrypted message from counsel. The SEC had formally acknowledged the integrity of my submission. The case had been opened. Their investigation officially had begun. Havoc's was in the storm now, fully, completely, and me? I just folded a blanket over my lap, picked up my mug, and scrolled quietly through LinkedIn job postings, just out of curiosity. The headlines hit before breakfast. I was stirring oatmeal when my phone buzzed with the first alert. Breaking. SEC confirms active whistleblower investigation into Havoc's technologies. I didn't click it right away. I just stood there, wooden spoon in hand, watching the steam curl up like smoke off a slow burn that had taken half a year to catch. Then I set the spoon down, turned off the burner, and finally opened the article. No names, of course, just a former executive, just alleged compliance discrepancies, just enough truth to make the PR team choke on their organic smoothies. By noon, 4 more outlets had picked it up. CNBC, Wired, even Tech Grit, a site that normally runs puff pieces about startup bros who think inventing a calendar app makes them philosophers. They were all circling the same question. How did Havoc's stock spike so sharply last quarter with no obvious catalyst? Somebody had poked the bear. And then, God bless the internet, someone leaked an internal email chain. First on Reddit, then on Twitter, then on every Slack channel inside the tech world like wildfire on gasoline. It started with a simple subject line. Q2 adjustments, urgent review. The body was pure poetry. Did compliance flag this? And the reply, oh, the reply. Compliance is gone. 2 words. That's all it took to turn Havoc's mystique into a meme. By 3 p.m., someone had made a t-shirt mock-up. By 5 p.m., it was trending on X under #compliance is gone, right next to videos of the CEO dodging reporters outside a WeWork lobby like a reality show villain avoiding spoilers. Meanwhile, the vultures started circling, except these weren't regulators. These were former vendors. The first post hit LinkedIn like a torpedo from a burning bridge. Boutique data security firm I remembered flagging months ago wrote, "We warned Havoc's about misaligned scopes in their RFP." Instead of paying us, they ghosted us mid-project. Glad someone finally turned the lights on over there. Another post followed, this one from an HR consultancy that had allegedly won a contract, only to never receive a signed agreement or a single dollar. They'd sent emails, invoices, even a couriered letter. No response. Now, we're naming names, and I was watching it all unfold with the detached serenity of someone who had already screamed into every void and now had nothing left but silence and sweet, slow retribution. No one knew it was me. Not yet. There were rumors, sure. Havoc's had a short list of people with motive, as if integrity were a vendetta. I'd heard from a friend still on the inside that they'd tried to pull badge access logs, laptop history, anything to trace the leak. But I'd wiped my tracks months ago. Meticulously. Professionally, I wasn't a rogue. I was a record, a quiet one. That night, I poured a second glass of wine and watched the CEO's face on Bloomberg. He looked like a man who couldn't figure out why the GPS was screaming at him while he sped toward a cliff he'd built himself. I didn't smile, not exactly, but something in me uncoiled. People always assume whistleblowers are loud, that they rant, rage, storm the gates. They forget that some of us whisper. Some of us just leave the door open and let the world walk in. The boardroom started leaking before legal could even finish drafting their first no comment. By Monday morning, I'd heard from 3 different people, none of them close friends, all of them shaken, each one whispering the same phrase like a prayer they didn't want answered. They're lawyering up. One even sent me a screenshot from a group chat. FYI, Jenkins retained his own counsel, not using company legal. Smart. He's toast if that Slack audit comes out. Has anyone heard from the CFO? No one had. The CFO, Greg Marsh, the guy who once called my department the fun police, was quietly placed on administrative leave to focus on family. Translation: he was the first sacrificial lamb, shuffled off with a glossy memo and a week's worth of NDAs. He deserved worse, honestly. Greg was the one who used to edit his own approval timestamps in the audit logs like no one would notice. I noticed. I always noticed. I had a whole folder called Greg being Greg Final Zip. HR, in full panic mode, issued one of their signature word salads. We are committed to fostering a culture of transparency and respect. Retaliation of any kind will not be tolerated. We stand by our employees. They stood by us like a dog stands by the vacuum, nervous, guilty, and already halfway out the room. But the real moment, came when I was scrolling through Spotify, trying to drown out the noise with something that wasn't headlines or heartburn, and I saw it. An episode of Tech Reckonings, podcast I used to mock for its obsession with IPO gossip and Silicon Valley scandals. The title, Havoc's Implosion, Who is the Whistleblower? I nearly dropped my phone. I hit play. The host sounded giddy in that detached way people get when they think they're talking about someone else's funeral. They walked through the timeline, stock bump, whistleblower report, trading halt. Then they started speculating. She or he, we don't know, but someone on the inside had access. This wasn't just a pissed-off intern. This was deep documentation, Slack exports, vendor contracts, possibly even emails flagged as deleted. I mean, the co-host chimed in. Rumor has it their VP of compliance was let go the same day the report landed. Coincidence? I don't believe in those. I paused it there. Not out of fear, not even out of anger, just caution. Watching people try to piece together a picture you painted in silence is its own kind of power. Like seeing strangers admire a mural and never knowing you held the brush. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen since last year, Tina, a former colleague from finance. Always nice, always safe, never brave. Her text was short. Was it you? I stared at it for a long time. I typed a few things, deleted them, typed again, deleted again. Eventually, I just put the phone face down on the table and poured myself some tea. Let them wonder. If I said yes, I'd become a target. If I said no, I'd become a liar. But if I said nothing, if I let the silence stretch just long enough, it would turn into myth. And you can't fire a myth, you can't subpoena it, you can't blacklist what you can't name. The fallout was theirs now. The headlines, the audits. The investor calls full of forced smiles and missing CFOs. I wasn't part of the company anymore, but I was everywhere inside it. The return wasn't some triumphant march through marble halls or a camera-ready redemption arc. It was quieter than that, colder, more surgical, like a scalpel slicing into rot, slowly, deliberately, without anesthetic. It started with a call to my attorney, encrypted, brief, and laced with the kind of polite urgency that only federal investigators can deliver. The SEC has a few follow-up questions, my attorney told me. They've cross-referenced your submissions with recent server logs. They want clarification, specifically on a summary labeled Q2 Compliance Final Price PDF. I felt it in my chest like a heartbeat skipping a stair. That document, I knew exactly which one. I'd signed it during a review meeting in April. It detailed our internal controls around vendor due diligence and outlined the gaps we needed to close before the next investor report. My version was clean, precise, truthful, but what Havoc submitted to investors? That wasn't mine. They kept my signature, but the numbers were padded. The flags I'd raised were omitted. In place of my notes was a glowing assessment of tightened controls and operational transparency, a lie paperclip to my credibility. Original file lived on my thumb drive. But more importantly, the metadata lived there too. Timestamps, hash values, edit trails. I instructed my attorney to confirm that version they submitted was post-signed and unauthorized. I have the original ready to verify. The reply from the SEC came the next day. Understood. We are escalating. They didn't need to say more. That one altered file alone could prove willful misrepresentation to shareholders. And with my original copy intact, they had what they needed, a smoking gun with serial numbers still fresh. 2 days later, my attorney forwarded another encrypted memo. My former assistant, Lee, nervous, brilliant Lee, had been subpoenaed. Not as a suspect, as a witness. Turns out they'd underestimated her too. Lee, bless her procedural little heart, had kept her own backup of our team's handover notes. Apparently, during a late-night cleanup before Q2 earnings, she'd been instructed by the CEO's chief of staff to shred anything Miranda touched that's not client-facing. Shred sessions, she called them in her testimony. She even remembered the wording. Too many eyes on this. Let's clean house. They fed her that line like it was an order from God. She wrote it down like it was evidence for one. The transcript of her testimony made its way to my inbox. Redacted, yes. But even with the blackouts, the weight was there. The intent, the fear. The CYA cowardice that always rises when liars realize someone was watching all along. She'd told the truth. Not because she owed me anything, but because someone had to. Because when the whole house is on fire, eventually someone screams who lit the match. I didn't reach out to Lee. I didn't send flowers. I didn't even send a thank you. I knew better. Contact from me would only make her a target. Instead, I asked my lawyer to ensure she had counsel. Quietly. Anonymously. That week, the SEC issued a new statement. Still measured, still clinical, but now with sharper teeth. Preliminary evidence indicates material alterations to compliance documents were made after executive certification. Investigation continues. Inside Havix, the calls had stopped being about spin. They were now about survival. Legal was preparing individuals for deposition. The board was dividing into two camps, those who'd known and pretended not to, and those who now needed a damn good lawyer to prove they didn't. The CEO, silent, vanished from internal comms. Rumors said he was on sabbatical. Translation, hiding in Aspen with no Wi-Fi and a team of PR damage control monks burning sage over his LinkedIn profile. And me? I sat on the screened porch of my little cabin, laptop open, logs crackling in the hearth, and read it all like fiction. I'd always been the adult in the room. Now, for the first time, that actually meant something. The CEO finally crawled out of hiding for a CNBC interview, and it was exactly the kind of performance you'd expect from a man who once described regulatory filings as just vibes and PDFs. He wore a blazer over a t-shirt like that made him relatable. Like maybe we'd all forget he'd signed falsified compliance documents with the same hand he used to high-five investors about Q2 momentum. The anchor went easy on him at first, warm-up questions about innovation and challenges in the tech space. But then she slid the knife in, smooth and smiling. There's been speculation about the whistleblower's access to high-level risk documentation. Can you speak to the integrity of those records? He blinked, smiled, swallowed hard. I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing, internal reviews, he said, suddenly fascinated by his own coffee mug. But Havix remains committed to our stakeholders and to transparency. That word, transparency. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my tea. He'd spent the better part of 3 years treating transparency like it was radioactive, something to be avoided unless wearing a full PR hazmat suit. The segment wrapped with his signature smirk, but something in it had cracked. You could see it if you looked closely. The kind of haunted twitch behind the eyes that comes when you realize the lights are still on but the exits have disappeared. 12 hours later, he was served. Not symbolically, not hypothetically. Literally served by a federal officer in the lobby of his high-rise. Witnesses say he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Maybe that ghost looked a little like a woman he once fired mid-Zoom, smiling politely while pocketing a thumb drive. By noon, the Department of Justice released a statement. Preliminary case opened against Havix Technologies, citing willful misrepresentation of financial controls and falsified compliance documentation. Evidence submitted voluntarily under federal whistleblower protections forms the foundation of this investigation. Voluntarily, not leaked, not coerced, voluntarily. Word landed like a punch in a marble hallway. That afternoon, Havix's board issued a statement dripping with the kind of manufactured outrage that only appears when people realize they were caught holding the bag. We are shocked and deeply disappointed by recent developments. The board was not aware of any impropriety and is cooperating fully with investigators. I read it twice just to soak in the irony. Shocked, disappointed, cooperating. Read like a breakup note from a man who cheated, got dumped, and now wants credit for not keying your car. But the real blow came from the shareholders. Within 48 hours, the first class action suit was filed, on behalf of investors misled by Havix Technologies' falsified risk disclosures and earnings misstatements. Another followed, then another. They were stacking up like chairs in a burning church. I didn't feel joy, not exactly, not glee. It wasn't vindictive anymore, it was precise. Surgical, a deep, strange calm settled in my chest like I'd finally stopped treading water. I wasn't angry. That emotion had been burned out of me by 1,000 ignored warnings, budget cuts, and can you make this look cleaner before we submit? Emails. This wasn't revenge. It was removal, like bad tissue cut from something that still had a chance to live. I sat by the window, watching the sun sink through pine trees, and read through the latest filings without flinching. No headline shocked me. No name surprised me. It was all exactly as it should be. Havix hadn't collapsed. It had been collapsing. I just turned on the lights. The SEC briefing was live-streamed on a gray Tuesday, the kind of morning that smells like old coffee and cold truth. No music, no flair. Just a podium, a seal, and the weight of federal tone. I watched from my laptop. Wrapped in a fleece blanket in the corner of the cabin, the pine logs in the fireplace crackling like distant applause. The lead official, clean-cut, precise, with that flat delivery government attorneys perfect in their sleep, stepped up and cleared his throat. This investigation has revealed systemic violations of corporate governance, investor deception, and fraudulent compliance reporting at Havix Technologies. He paused, flipped a page, didn't blink. Falsified risk disclosures, tampered audit trails, and willful misrepresentation of financial health across multiple quarters. These findings would not have been possible without the foresight and integrity of one former executive who voluntarily provided a comprehensive, time-stamped data set substantiating every claim. I didn't move. The screen didn't name me. The broadcast didn't show my face. But my name was in the bones of it, in the silence that followed, in the questions no one asked, because they already knew the answer. The CEO, gone, not on sabbatical, not transitioning, officially terminated. His golden parachute cut mid-deployment. Rumor had it he tried to float some redemption arc on Twitter the night before, but it tanked, mostly gifs and snarky replies. One of them just said, "Compliance is gone, bro." Trading in Havix stock was suspended indefinitely. Investors scrambled. Analysts wept. Someone started a thread titled, "Remember when this was the hottest IPO of 2022? It was mostly memes now, burning buildings, Titanic references, a few clever remixes of my favorite. Did compliance flag this? Compliance is gone." Inside the cabin, the world was quiet. The only sound was the wind against the window pane and the soft ping of a new email. I didn't check it immediately. I let the moment breathe. Let the fire crackle. Let the press conference close with a solemn line about ongoing accountability. Then I sipped my tea, clicked the email, a consulting offer, discreet, high-paying, from a firm that wanted someone who could see the fire before the smoke. They didn't say the word whistleblower, they didn't have to. Outside, a fox padded silently across the snow, nose low, tail high, vanishing into the trees like it had somewhere better to be. I closed the laptop, sat back. There would be no book deal, no TED Talk, no think piece in Fast Company about the price of doing what's right. I wasn't interested in being their redemption arc or their cautionary tale. I wasn't a headline. I was the quiet woman they buried under fake smiles and butchered spreadsheets. And I left them the shovel. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.